They say some encounters change the course of a life forever, breaking down invisible walls and awakening the soul from its slumber. This is the story of Alejandro Vega, a powerful millionaire, owner of an empire and unbreakable arrogance, who never imagined that a small yet brave girl named Angie would teach him the deepest lesson about true wealth. What started as a trivial meeting ended up transforming both their lives forever. Alejandro Vega was the definition of success. From his office on the 45th floor of one of the city's tallest buildings, he controlled a business empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His face was serious, almost expressionless, but his eyes reflected a calculating fire and an unbreakable will. Money to him was not only a symbol of power, but the measure of his worth. As he reviewed piles of contracts and gave orders to his team of executives, his mind barely allowed itself a break. His schedule was tight, his commitments unbreakable. Alejandro was used to people treating him with respect, or rather, fear. No one dared to question his decisions, and he made sure that never changed. But that day, unexpected news interrupted his routine. His secretary told him that a girl wanted to see him to sell cookies. To Alejandro, it was an insult to his time and authority, but something about that request caught his attention. He decided to go down personally and face the girl. "Mr. Vega, a girl is waiting in the lobby. She wants to sell you some cookies to help her sick mother," the secretary said with a mix of compassion and surprise. Alejandro frowned and looked at his watch. His day was planned to the minute, and the idea of attending to a girl selling cookies seemed absurd. "Tell her I don't have time for such nonsense," he ordered brusquely. But as his secretary turned to obey, something stopped him. A part of him, maybe a distant memory of his own tough childhood, made him lower his gaze toward the door. He decided to go down himself to send her away quickly. As he walked down the long marble hallway toward the lobby, Alejandro prepared for a brief confrontation, a quick way to make things clear. He wasn't here to waste time with small problems. Upon arriving at the lobby, he saw Angie, a small girl, no older than 10, holding a box of cookies wrapped in colorful paper and with hands that trembled slightly. Her shirt was a bit worn and her shoes were old, but her eyes shone with a determination that surprised Alejandro. "Good afternoon. Sir, would you like to buy some cookies?" she asked with a sweet but confident voice. Alejandro looked her up and down, a disdainful smile forming on his face. He couldn't believe a girl dared to interrupt him. "Cookies? Do you really think I have time for that nonsense?" he said, not hiding his contempt. Around them, some people stopped to watch, but no one said anything. Alejandro was a powerful and feared man, and no one dared to challenge him. But Angie didn't lower her head or back down. "Sir, these are homemade cookies I made myself to help my sick mother," Angie replied with a voice that trembled a little but didn't yield. "Sick?" Alejandro repeated mockingly. "Look, kid, life is not a fairy tale. There's no time for games or childish vendettas here. If you want to survive, learn to work for real and stop begging or selling nonsense on the street." Asterisk. Angie looked at him firmly, no fear or tears. "I'm not begging. I'm selling something I made with my own hands." Alejandro let out a dry laugh and stepped closer, imposing his presence. "That won't get you anywhere. The world is harsh, and you're not ready for it." The tension grew, and the people around them started murmuring, some supporting the girl, others surprised by the millionaire's coldness. Then Angie said something no one expected. "My mom always tells me that the real rich aren't those who have a lot of money, but those who help others the most." A heavy silence fell over the crowd. The phrase hit Alejandro like a hammer. For a moment, he felt the ground beneath his feet shift. No one had spoken to him like that. No one had challenged him like that in years. Alejandro was used to commanding and being respected, not challenged by a neighborhood girl. His expression turned serious, and for the first time, a shadow of doubt appeared in his eyes. Without answering, he turned on his heels and got into his car, his heart racing and his mind in chaos. As he drove through the city's illuminated streets, Alejandro felt more lost than ever. Those words kept repeating in his head, like a song he couldn't get out of his mind. His pride prevented him from admitting it. But he felt something inside him had changed. The rigidity that always defined him was starting to crack. He thought of his father, who taught him to fight alone, to trust no one. He thought of his lonely life, of empty luxuries and superficial relationships. That night, in his penthouse, Alejandro couldn't sleep. The city sparkled beneath his feet, but his soul was in darkness. Sitting by the window with a glass of whiskey in hand, Alejandro stared at the distant lights. Angie's voice echoed loudly in his mind. The real rich aren't those with money, but those who help. He wondered if he had been fair to her, if he had treated her well. A mix of shame and regret overwhelmed him. For the first time, he admitted that money didn't fill all the voids, that his professional success didn't translate into happiness or inner peace. Slowly, he made a decision. He had to change. But he didn't know how or where to start. 80 dawn. Alejandro was still awake, reflecting on his life. He remembered his harsh childhood, the abandonment, the lack of love. He realized his arrogance and hardness had been shields hiding his own wounds. He promised himself he would do everything possible to become a different man, to leave behind ego and indifference. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. He would have to learn to listen and open his heart. Driven by this need for change, Alejandro began searching for Angie. He asked in shops. In the neighborhood the girl had mentioned where she lived. He ventured into a humble neighborhood, far from his glass and steel offices. There, reality was different. Small houses, dusty streets, people struggling to survive. Alejandro felt for the first time in long, while that his world was collapsing to make way for another, more real, more human. Finally, he found the house where Angie lived with her mother. A small home with peeling walls, and a door that looked ready to give way. Angie's mother, a thin and pale woman, greeted him with a mix of surprise and gratitude. Despite the circumstances, her gaze conveyed hope and strength. Alejandro felt a pang in his chest upon seeing her. Here was the reason behind Angie's fight, the force that drove her. He pulled an envelope full of money and a bag of provisions from his briefcase. Angie's mother tried to refuse, but Alejandro insisted. "This isn't charity. It's an investment in you," he said sincerely. He felt this gesture was just the first step on a path that promised to be long and difficult, but he was determined to follow it. Over time, Alejandro became involved in projects to help other families in similar situations. He visited humble neighborhoods, listened to stories of pain and hope. Little by little, he learned to serve, to put himself in others' shoes. His world changed, and with it, his perspective on wealth and success. A special bond formed between Alejandro and Angie. He admired her strength and courage, and she trusted him as a protector and friend. Together, they launched initiatives to improve the lives of vulnerable children and families. Alejandro understood that his fortune only made sense if it was used to transform lives, not to feed his ego. His company changed focus, emphasizing social responsibility and giving back to the community. The story closes with Alejandro visiting a community center, helping hundreds of children. Among laughter and games, he always remembered Angie's lesson. Because the greatest wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in love, solidarity, and humility. This is the true wealth we should all seek.